and welcome back to this week's new video. My name is Noah if you're new here, and recently I have been making a lot of book related videos. As you can tell from the title, I read an insane amount of books. I think this is the largest number of books that I have read in a month, and that is 20 books, so I'm here to share with you my July wrap up. So I'm going to go in the order that I read them. The first book I actually started in June, but I finished it in July, so I'm counting it, and that is Stay Sexy and Don't Get Murdered, the definitive how-to guide by Kilgariff and Georgia Hardstark, who are the hosts of my favorite Murder, which is my favorite podcast. This book is a dual memoir with a little bit of the how-to guide to really not only stay sexy and not get murdered, but also to like empower yourself, how to be more confident, and all of the above, everything in between. I loved it. I feel like you would enjoy it more if you know about this podcast, if you listen to this podcast, because I could only read this book and hear everything in Georgia and Karen's voice, which just made it all the more funnier. My favorite part in this book was the part where there's like a latchkey kid guide. It's told in the second person. You can tell it was like Karen's actual experience, but it was hilarious. Not relatable in the sense because I was a latchkey kid, but relatable because I have an older sister also, and just the battle of like territory within the house and things like that. I gave this book 5 stars. The second book I read and finished, I guess, in July is Ignite Me by Tahereh Mafi. This book is the third book in the Shatter Me series. I have been blowing through it. I really have been trying to pace myself, but I recently even went out to buy the 5th book, Defy Me, and although it's not in the paperback, I just couldn't wait to have it in the paperback. I'm not really sure what to say about the series without ruining it, but the series just gets better and better. I am loving it so far. Obviously, how could I not? And I am really enjoying Tahereh Mafi's writing. The third book that I read is A Nearly Normal Family by M.T. Edvardsson. This book has been translated, I think, from Swedish, and it has been translated by Rachel Wilson Broyles. This was my book of the month. I think one of my very first books of the month, actually, and it's a mystery thriller. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. It was told in 3 perspectives from Stella, a girl 18 or a young woman actually, who has been accused of murder or is in jail, and then her pastor father and her defense attorney mother. It starts out told by the father, Stella, the daughter, and the mother. Really kept me on my toes, didn't know what to expect, and even when I did, there was this whole other twist. Because it was told in 3 different perspectives, once you thought you knew something and you completed the puzzle, as soon as the perspective changed, it kind of just fucked you over, and you're just like, holy shit, I actually don't know the whole story, and it gave me a lot of How to Get Away with Murder vibes. The 4th book I read was The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. I gave this book 5 stars. I really love her To All the Boys series, so I really wanted to give her other books a try, and I'm so glad I did. It was very, very easy to get through because I believe it is YA, but I also really enjoyed it because I found it very relatable. I don't like Belly's nickname, but I too had a crush on like a childhood friend for the longest time in the world, and though it didn't pan out the same way that it did for Belly, it was still really interesting to read, and I was just squealing the whole time. I just really felt for Belly so much, and I really want to buy the rest of the series. Obviously, I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I do have reading vlogs, so I'll leave those linked down below if they're related, or up in the card here, I think. So if you want to know more about the book, you can always watch the vlogs. The 5th book I read for the month was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is his 3rd book. I also got this from Book of the Month, and honestly, I've read all his books and I've loved every single one, and I think they just keep getting better and better. I think this book was my favorite one yet. This was also a bit of a mystery thriller vibes, which is so on brand for me. That's absolutely my favorite genre. Jules is apartment sitting in a really famous apartment building in New York called the Bartholomew, and there's just something really sus going on. Like, someone disappears and she sort of has to figure out what happened to her friend Ingrid, and she uncovers a bit of a mystery. I really like that Riley Sager sort of flips back and forth from the present to the future, but it's actually like the present in both time settings. So when it's written in the future, like the now, he'll write in italics so you'll know the difference. The story takes place over a week, and it just felt really suspenseful. It was very creepy, and I could not put this book down. I buddy read this with my friend Noelle, who has also read Riley Sager, and I'm so glad I did. I feel really happy, like I'm able to talk to people about books that I'm reading now. Number 6 was The Lightning Thief by Riordan. I decided to give this series another go just because I have read at least the first book before, but I couldn't really remember. I definitely didn't read the entire series, so it was kind of like a little trip down memory lane, and I'm really glad it did. I gave this book 5 stars as well. It's just so action-packed, got me super interested into Greek mythology again. I actually have the third book, The Titan's Curse. I have been wanting to buy the series because I love it so much, but I just can't wait long enough, so I just end up borrowing them from the library. Number 7 was Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. I gave this book 4 stars. I really did enjoy it. Unfortunately, I did watch the film before. I loved Simon so much. I bawled my eyes out. Like, I got a headache from being dehydrated. I cried so much. But the only thing that bothered me from this book was that sometimes I could tell that someone who wasn't an actual teenager was writing it. Things like the Tumblr instead of writing Tumblr was very bothersome for me. It bothered me. And sometimes I would be like, is this something believable that a high schooler would say? Like, was I like this? Were my friends like this? And that was a little bit bothersome. That's why I docked it a star. Otherwise, I did really enjoy Simon's coming out story and how he had this really great support system, which was really heartwarming to hear about. Number 8 was Restore Me by Tahereh Mafi. This is the 4th book in the series. Again, I cannot say too much about it because I would feel like I would just give everything away. After reading Restore Me, I just had so many questions and I really couldn't wait to read the other books, so that's why I had to purchase Defy Me. I had to be all caught up before sadly the last book came out, but of course I loved this. And since there was another novella, my 9th book of the month was Shadow Me, which is 4.5, also by Tahereh Mafi. This book was in Kenji's perspective. Oh, I of course gave 5 stars to Restore Me. I'm not really sure how to rate the novellas. I don't think I have been on Goodreads because they don't give me the same type of vibes. I feel like they just sort of fill in the cracks a little bit and they don't really propel the story forward. It's just literally in another perspective. But it was interesting to see how Kenji works, how this guy who is supposedly super happy and joking around all the time and sort of the mood maker of the group has these feelings of grief, doubt, and just sadness all around. And I feel like as the reader got to learn a lot more about him, understand that he has these different levels to him. Number 10 was Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. This was also a little bit of a trip down memory lane. I actually read this on the Sunday before the reading rush began because I had finished Lock Every Door. Took me a really long time to read that because Noelle hadn't gotten her book yet, so I didn't want to rush through it. Anyway, I didn't have anything to read for that Sunday, so I just picked this up. I knew it would be quick and easy and I could finish it in a day, and it was another trip down memory lane. However, I only gave this book 3 stars because I just felt like I enjoyed it so much more when I was younger, that it was a whole new world that I had no idea about. But now, as I'm older and I'm like more educated, I know times are different than this. It was interesting because you can see people like legit build their houses from scratch alone. They have no one in this world. Like, I'm surprised that she had family near enough to like see them during Christmas time, but I think that this would definitely be more interesting for a younger audience. So now we're going to be going into the books that I read for the reading rush. If you want to see more in depth of what I did during the week, how I read these books, my reactions to them, I do have a reading rush vlog up. But the first book that I read, The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I read Milk and Honey earlier this year. It was one of the first books that I read this year, and so I thought it was only right to read her second installment. I find it really weird, like I don't know how to rate these books, so I gave it a 3 star. I wasn't like in love with it. There are poems that I really did enjoy, but it's not like I enjoyed every single poem, and I think 3 stars is really average, so that's not a bad review at all. I said in the vlog that her poetry is very simplified, and I feel like in this way I can connect to it much faster and much easier without any sort of annotation and analyzing like I would do in school. But I did really enjoy her second installment as well. Next was Red, White, and Royal Blue by McQuiston. Of course, I'm sure you've heard about this book so much and it was hyped up so much, but rightly so because it totally lived up to the hype. I only gave this book 4 stars because I didn't really feel this like heart-wrenching connection to the book. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I finished it in a day. From the beginning, I really was rooting for Alex and Henry, especially because I knew how hard it was for them to be together, and it was sort of exciting to see that they finally came to terms with their feelings and that like that's what they actually wanted. hinted like the anger that Alex was manifesting was actually because he had a crush on this guy, which is so cute. I think the reason why I docked a star, even though I really did enjoy it, was because there were just some questions. Like, I know it's a romance book, but the happy ending sort of just seemed really clean. In terms of international relations, was this a really realistic ending? England had a really hard time accepting Meghan Markle. Like, there was a lot of racism surrounding that. Would they also be okay with a gay prince? Like, would they accept him the same way? I think that would be really interesting to see how that would work out in a real world. Also, because President Claremont was woman president, I think that was a really amazing universe to just fall back into, to see what kind of alternate universe we could have lived in. Number 13 was Dear Martin by Nick Stone. I gave this book 4 stars. This book is unfortunately the harsh reality of the US that we currently live in. It was very angering. This did give me a bit of the Hate You Give vibes. I think this is a book that everyone should read. There was a little twist in the middle that I wasn't expecting that propelled it forward. Number 14, The Necessary Death of Louis Winter by Malcolm McKay. I only gave this book 2 stars, okay? This book, the premise of it seemed really interesting because it was about an assassin who works freelance for the mafia in Scotland who gets a phone call saying that he needs to get rid of Louis Winter. It's sort of like a gang rivalry situation, but the point is that, like, you are taken through the death and how it's easy to kill a man, but it's hard to kill a man well, which it says on the cover. The execution of it was really bad. There were very few sentences that were longer than 10 words, so it was so choppy that it was hard to enjoy. There was a crazy amount of characters that were getting involved, but there were like too many perspectives, and it wasn't even told in depth like it does in Game of Thrones, which is why it made it harder to enjoy. I think the concept of the story was something I was really interested in because, especially in a TV show, I think that would have been really cool to see, but just in reality of reading it, I didn't enjoy it. Number 15 for the month was Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. This was also 2 stars. I was really excited about it because, one, many YouTube booktubers were, and it was hyped up, and because it's an Asian American author that I wanted to be able to support. The concept of it, again, like The Necessary Death of Louis Winter, seems really interesting to me, but it was just so weird. I wasn't interested in the characters at all. Like, I had no connection to them whatsoever. I didn't give a shit. I didn't know what the timeline was. I didn't know what was going to happen within the timeline, like what was the end result, because there were so many twists and turns that some would be a dead end. It wouldn't pan out the way that I thought it would, and I would be like, what is the purpose of this happening? Why is this twist and turn happening? Like, why are they so often? And again, I think the execution of it just wasn't really well. Number 16 is Geekerella by Ashley Poston. Things were looking up for me for the reading rush because this was a 5-star read. I really liked this. I think this is my very first retelling, if I can remember correctly, and I loved the geeky aspect of it. I really liked like the fan world. It gave me Sydney White vibes, which I thought was really cute. Because it was told in a dual perspective, I found it much more exciting to see how everything was going to turn out, because as the reader, I of course know everything that's going on and even what Darian and Ella are thinking, but like it was all just exciting to see how it would all come together. I liked it so much that I even got the second book in the Once Upon a Con series, Princess and the Fangirl. I think this is a Prince and the Pauper retelling. I don't think I know what that story is about. I definitely have never read it before, but I really enjoyed Geekerella, so I'm really excited to start this book as well. Number 17 was Autobiography by Christina Lauren, and I also gave this book 5 stars. These romance books, I'm telling you, I'm really enjoying them. This was my very first book by Christina Lauren, and I'm so glad that I was able to enjoy it. Autobiography fit really well for the reading rush for the prompt of a book with a purple cover. This book was really sweet. It was really interesting. Like the whole religion Mormon aspect of it was really interesting. It sort of felt more like a forbidden love. Number 18 for July was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This was my 8th and last read of the reading rush, and I gave the book 4 stars. Someone wrote on a review on the book that it was the best fictional world since Harry Potter, which just gave it too many high expectations for me, and it definitely didn't live up to that, and I feel like that's why it was docked another star. I did really enjoy it, and it got really good towards the end, because I was very confused in the beginning. I didn't know what I was supposed to be looking at. There was a map in the book, but it was very confusing. There were a lot of places mentioned that weren't on the map that I wasn't really understanding. It wasn't like towards the end, it was more like past the middle when I finally started to get a hang of it. But obviously I enjoyed the Grishaverse enough to borrow Siege and Storm, the second book in the Grishaverse. Number 19 was Little House on the Prairie by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I give this book 3 stars as well. I wanted to get to the whole series this year just because it had been such a long time since I read it, and it was a series that I thoroughly enjoyed when I was younger. But just when I was reading it, like, again, the times are really different. So they're talking about like Native Americans, they're like racist towards them, not specifically the Ingalls family, but like that surrounding world around it. I definitely feel like if I read it again, it'll taint the series for me, and I kind of want to just keep it as a series that I really enjoyed reading when I was younger. It was definitely really interesting to see a world of early America and how people were coming up in the world, how they survived, but I'm hesitant on finishing the series now. The last final book that I read for July was The Authoritative Calvin and Hobbes Treasury by Bill Watterson. I only gave this book 2 stars because I'm not the biggest fan of Calvin Hobbes. The only reason why I borrowed this book was because there was a prompt on the Reading Rush that said read a 5-star read, and I wasn't sure if one, I was supposed to pick a 5-star read that I like read or read an actual 5-star read, so I scoured through Goodreads just in case, and Calvin and Hobbes was rated very, very high, so that's why I borrowed it. It just came really late from the library. I only gave it 2 stars because I'm not the biggest fan of Calvin and Hobbes, and the book was like 200 plus pages. The comics were short. There were some where it was just one single comic strip and then there would be like a completely different related story on the next one. It felt really long to me. It was still enjoyable enough for me to finish the entire thing. I also just really liked seeing Calvin and Hobbes' relationship, that it's a 6-year-old kid with his stuffed animal, and how like in childhood children always have imaginary friends, or their imagination is much broader, and how they're more open to seeing the world in a different way. I hope you guys enjoyed. I can't believe I read 20 books. I'm definitely slacking now in August. I feel like I'm not reading as much because the reading rush kind of tuckered me out and I might be in a bit of a slump. Right now I didn't even tell you what I'm reading. I'm reading The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm only on page 172, and of course it's very, very sad, but historical fiction is a genre that I haven't read in a while, and it's one that I really enjoy, especially ones based in World War II. And if it says France or it's related to France or anything Francophone culture, I'm interested in reading it. Well, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.